Hotel. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Matthew Daniels TV. I'm your host, the illustrious Matthew Daniels, the author, the writer, the scribe, and the bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm, world. I am the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, family, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. For any of y'all out there that's watching this and was watching earlier when I started this live and had to stop it, I apologize for cutting the information off. Something came up that I had to go tend to, but we're back on it now, so no harm, no foul. Hey, let's start this one off with a question. All right, let's start this one off with a question. Do you believe in ghosts? Right? Do you believe that an individual can pass away in their spirit, not fully transition over into the realm of the ancestors, the realm of the deceased, and that their spirit, their ghost, their essence can remain on this physical plane? Do you believe that ghosts are real? Yes or no? I, for one, believe that ghosts are real, and I've had several things happen to me over my lifetime that brings me to that conclusion. And so I'm just curious about you guys. And I want to tell you guys something. If you don't believe in ghosts already, if you don't believe that a disembodied spirit can be trapped on this physical plane of existence, then after this video, you just might be convinced. We're continuing on with that theme of allowing the ancestors to speak. And today, we're going to be talking about plantation ghost stories, evidence to validate the ancestors. Sandra, I see you in the chat. What's up? Good afternoon. I'm glad you got the notice, man. I'm real glad you got the notice. I don't know what's going on with that, but you're not the first person that has said that to me. And honestly, I'm not sure if there's anything I can do about it. So I'm just happy you got it this time. And I'm glad you tapping in because this one is going to be real good and it's going to be very, very, very educational. And we're going to be digging into what the ancestors had to say about ghosts. And we're going to be presenting evidence to validate what the ancestors had to say. Now, obviously, I don't have a time machine. I can't take you guys back in time and prove to you that these ghost stories were real, but I can give you compelling evidence to validate some of these claims. And I'm going to do that in just a second. Let's get right off into it, family. L Bigfoot, what's up, family? Hotel, good to see you in the building. Good to see you in the building. Hey, I think you're going to really like this one. So if you can't sit through the whole live, make sure you come back and finish up this video because I'm finna put some stuff out there that I don't think anybody has ever put out there before. And I'm finna tie some things together that I don't believe has ever been tied together before. So when we're talking about ghosts, I think the first question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is a ghost? Now, of course, all of us have an idea about what a ghost is, but just to make sure that we all on the same page, let's start off with a definition. In folklore, a ghost is the soul or spirit of a dead person or non-human animal that is believed to be able to appear to the living. In ghost lore, descriptions of ghosts vary widely from an invisible presence to translucent or barely visible wispy shapes to realistic lifelike forms, meaning a ghost can appear looking like a man, looking like an animal, looking like a shadowy figure, looking like a puff of smoke, or just some vague outline off in the distance. Now, other terms associated with the ghost are apparition, haunt, phantom, poltergeist, shade, specter, spirit, spook, wrath, demon, and ghoul, meaning that you can use a lot of words to describe the phenomenon that we know of as a ghost. But we're basically talking about disembodied spirits, individuals, human or animals, that have passed on, that are dead, but their spirit is still here in this physical realm. Now, the belief in the existence of an afterlife as well as manifestations of the spirits of the dead, is widespread, dating back to animism or ancestor worship in pre-literate cultures, meaning they have been talking about ghosts and believing in ghosts even before mankind had the ability to write. Certain religious practices, funeral rites, exorcisms, and some practices of spiritualism and ritual magic are especially designed to rest the spirits of the dead. Ghosts are generally described as solitary human-like essences, though stories of ghostly armies and ghosts of animals other than humans have also been recounted. So we see that the theme of the ghost is the disembodied spirit. And there are several rituals that mankind has that are attempting to give the ghost rest so the ghost can move on into the next realm, into the next life. Now that's important because why would the concept of giving the ghost rest be associated with assisting them in moving on to the next realm or into the next life? That's because when people think about ghosts, one of the main reasons why an individual thinks a ghost is still on this earthly realm, in this earthly plane, is because they have some type of unfinished business, or they died, they were killed in an extremely horrific way, and their spirit just has no rest, or they have something that they want to accomplish. Right now, this concept of a ghost and why they are trapped in this physical realm goes back thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years, which in and of itself is evidence that this phenomenon is real. Because how is it that people from different cultures, different places on the planet Earth, from different moments in time, can have similar stories describing the same phenomenon? So what we're going to do, family, I have a very specific slave narrative that I'm going to go into today, and we're going to look for evidence of this individual ancestor's ghost stories, right? But before we go into the specific ancestor whose ghost stories I'm going to be attempting to prove and give validity to, I'm going to just look into a few other of the ancestors' oral histories, aka the slave narratives, to show you guys that on multiple plantations in multiple states across the South, our ancestors were all talking about ghosts and spirits and things of that nature, which makes sense to me because I always start, right? I always start, if our ancestors were enslaved and treated so badly and so horribly, and they were murdered in some of the most cruel ways, burned alive, beheaded, hung, put in torture racks, chased down by dogs, shot dead, then the idea that a ghost is a spirit with unfinished business, that is why they're still here on earth, then a lot of our ancestors would have died in the manner that is intimately related to what would cause a ghost to stay in this physical realm, dying in an extremely cruel and horrific way, and dying unexpectedly with work still needing to be done on this realm, on planet Earth. So we're going to look at this first ghost story right here out of one of the ancestors, just so I can show you guys what they thought about the concepts of ghosts on the plantation. This ancestor says that they're talking about a farm that's haunted. Just for context, they say, many families tries to live in that house, but am forced to move. It am supposed the niggers what the cruel master on that farm killed in slave times comes back to tantalize. And I guess that's like a word that they're probably trying to say torment. The ghostess comes in the night and walks back and forth across the yard, and they can see him as plain as day. There am nobody what will stay on that farm. So we have right here, fresh out the gate, we have an ancestor talking about a haunted farm, and the ancestor is telling us that it's supposed by the individuals in that area that have seen these ghosts, that these ghosts or people who were enslaved that were killed by the cruel master on that plantation. Now remember, even when we went back to the definition of a ghost, we already understand that these are disembodied spirits, a lot of which who have been killed in horrific ways and who have been murdered when they still have work to do left on planet Earth. And so I wanted to show you that this concept itself doesn't just come from Wikipedia. It doesn't just come from me. It doesn't just come from Hollywood movies or books that you might have read. This was the conceptualization of a ghost from our ancestors when there were no TVs, there were no radios. These individuals, over 95% of them could not even read. So how did they come to these conclusions? A lot of the times based on what the ghosts actually looked like. Some of them had conversations with these ghosts. And in my opinion, because the phenomenon is real, they had some real understanding of what was going on. Now look, this same individual says, my pappy are coming home on the horse one night and he feel like someone on that horse behind him. He turned and can see something. He say, what you gets on my horse? But there am no answer. He tries to touch that thing, but he passes his hand right through it and he know it a ghost. And so when he realized there was a ghost, he takes off running like grease lightning, like a bat out of hell, and gets up out of there. And so we see this ancestor is telling us two specific ghost stories, and they're in line with what we know a ghost to be. Now, this ghost was riding a horse. Remember the definition. They said that the ghost can either be in human form or in animal form. So this ancestor actually saw a ghost human riding a ghost horse. And when the ancestor tried to touch the ghost, his hand went right through it. Sounds just like some of the ghost stories that you will hear about today, mind you. But let's continue before we get into the main one. I'm finna show you guys another ghost story just to show you that I could go all day giving you ghost stories, but I want to zero in on one to offer evidence that the ghost story is real. And I know you wondering, Poop, Matthew Daniels, the real bookworm, how can you prove a ghost story is real? Just stay tuned. I'm going to shock you. Look what this ancestor say. Ghostess, I was taking care of a white man when he died, and I seen something about 3 feet high and black. Now that makes me think about a child, right? Being 3 feet high. That's either a midget or that's a child, right? I seen something about 3 feet high and black. I reckon I must have fainted because they has the doctor for me. So this ancestor sees something 3 feet high and black, a ghost, and next thing the ancestor know, waking up with doctors around. They done brought out the doctors. So this individual saw something that caused such a reaction, they passed out. The ancestor goes on to say, and on dark nights, I see ghostes what has no head. That made me think about stories like the headless horseman, or individuals walking around, ghosts walking around carrying their heads. The kind of stuff that you think is coming from Hollywood, or that you think is just coming from books, that people are just making up these concepts right now today. No, a lot of these things have been being seen for thousands of years. But what I'm showing you now is these same types of entities have been being seen since the time of our ancestors and their enslavement right there on the slave plantation. And this individual ghostess, multiple, that had no head, who knows? They was probably beheaded somewhere in life. The ancestor says they looks like they wild and they is all in different performance. When I was going down the road and feel a hot steam and look over my shoulder, I can see them plain as you standing there. I seen them when my wife was with me, but she can't see them because some people ain't gifted to see them. Have you ever heard that before? You have 2 or 3 individuals. One person sees a figure, sees a light, sees a hand, sees something moving, sees something floating across the room, but somebody else, they may not be spiritually enough in tune to actually see the ghost, but somebody else actually sees it. So what I'm showing you again is multiple ghost stories on the plantation. But we're going to highlight one just to see if we can prove it. Now look, check this out. I'm going to show you one more random ghost story so you fully comprehend that the ancestors, they saw ghosts all the time on these plantations. It was nothing to them. Well, not it was nothing, but it was nothing strange. It's not like a one and done. It isn't a one-off occurrence. Now this ancestor says, spirits, I used to see them. Now remember from the definition, a spirit, a ghost, a ghoul, a haunt, a hant, they all talking about the same phenomenon. So spirits, I used to see them. I scared of them. Sometimes they looks natural and sometimes like the shadow. If and they look like the shadow, just keep on looking at them till they looks natural. If and you walks long, they come right upside you. If and you looks over your left shoulder, you see them. They makes the air feel warm and your hair rise up. And sometimes they gives you the cold chills. How many times have you heard somebody talking about a ghost story and they say before they seen anything, heard anything, noticed any type of phenomenon, the room got cold. Their hair stood up on their arms and they just felt a chill in the air. Well, these things have been associating the phenomenon for a long time. The ancestor says you can feel it when they with you. I sat here and seen them standing in the gate. They goes round like they done when they are living. Some say they can't cross water. So I want you guys to see that we're talking about the exact same phenomenon that they're talking about now. And this phenomenon has been being experienced for a very, very long time. Now, to get into something specific and to give evidence and credibility to a ghost story, the specific slave narrative that we're going to be coming out of today, letting the ancestors speak, is a slave narrative that comes out of South Carolina. Now, the ancestor's name is Janie Gorman, and she was born in 1853. And she was enslaved in Union County, South Carolina on the Keenan Plantation. And her slave owner was named Bill William Keenan. Now, all of this is important because I told you guys there is key bits of information that is documented inside of these slave narratives where if you keen on your research and you're interested enough to do the work, you can uncover a lot of history. They give you names, they give you dates, they give you locations. And an individual will try to make you think that there is no historical value to these slave narratives. But every time I investigate the claims, I come back to something being true. So while we're building up to the actual ghost story itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to validate every aspect of this ancestor story because I want to show you how credible the ancestor Janie Gorman is. And then when we go into her description of the ghost, I'm going to give you evidence that what she's saying about that is true as well. I'm going to show you. Don't let anybody discredit the oral history of our ancestors. Let's get it. Now remember, I said she was enslaved on the Bill William Keenan Plantation in Union County, South Carolina. Hold on, I'll put South. Hold on, just a second. I meant to. Let me just a quick fix. I put South Plantation. That should say South Carolina. All right, quick fix. No harm, no foul. Boom, boom. There we go. So what you're looking at on your screen, hey, Brooklyn Zoo, salute family, thanks for tapping in, bro. Hey, you believe in ghosts? Quick question, y'all in the chat, do y'all even believe in ghosts, yes or no? Anyway, what you're looking at on the screen This is the Keenan Plantation in Union County, South Carolina. It still stands to this day. So look what the ancestor said. The ancestor said, or they recorded the ancestor as telling them that she was born in slavery on the plantation of Bill Keenan in Union County. Now, fact number one to be verified. There is actually a slave plantation in Union County that was ran by a Bill William Keenan. And I'm showing you the plantation right now on your screen just to validate what the ancestor is saying. Okay, yes, yep. Hey, man. Hey, me too. Me too, family. So look at this, family. I'm going to give y'all a little history on the Keenan plantation, and we're going to look at what the ancestor had to say about it. So it was built in 1855 by William Keenan, the plantation that's on your screen. At that time, the property included 4,000 acres and was known as Keenan Plantation. In 1876, Benjamin H. Rice bought the Keenan property and had also inherited an adjoining plantation, Pleasant Grove, making it 8,000 acres total. In 1885, T.C. Duncan inherited the house from his maternal grandparents. Now pay attention, this is going to be important in a minute. Spoiler alert. The house was named the Meridian after three generations that lived at the house, Merriman, Rice, Duncan. 7 generations have come and gone, and the last sold the property in 1990, and it's now known as the Inn at Meriden, a bed and breakfast that sits on 9 acres of land. So was the ancestor telling the truth about where she was enslaved and the name of the man that owned the plantation? Yes, she was. We're going to verify that everything she said was true. Now let's continue on with the narrative. After she tells us where she was enslaved at, and she tells us the name of the slave owner, the ancestor says the place was situated between Pacolet River and Fair Forest Creek, and near where Governor Gist had a plantation. So we get more geographical information that we can either prove to be true or prove to be false. And so this is what you have to do to either validate what the ancestor is saying or invalidate what the ancestor is saying. Now, the ancestor said that where she was enslaved, the Keenan plantation was situated between the Pacolet River and the Fair Forest Creek. And what I did, family, you got to do the research. You got to look some of this stuff up. I did the legwork for you. Don't worry about it. So look on the left side of your screen. We're looking at Google Maps for anybody that's interested. South Carolina. The top circle, it says the Inn at Meriden. That's that location right there. Now remember, family, the house, the Bill Keenan Plantation House, was named the Meriden after 3 generations that lived at the house. And today, it's known as the Inn at Meriden. And it's a bed and breakfast that sits on 9 acres of land. So the name has switched. So if you don't go all the way back and connect the dots, you may not know that you're looking at the plantation. You may not know that. But I did the work for you. So the plantation is the Inn at Meriden. Okay, let's go right back to it. So the circle on the top left, circled in black, the inn, let me show you, the Inn at Meriden. Now that's the plantation that the ancestor said was situated between Fair Forest Creek and the Pacolet River. So we see there is the Fair Forest Creek, and there is the plantation, which is now an inn. Now, if we go to the other map on the right-hand side, look at the bottom circle. Okay, look at the bottom circle. You see the Inn at Meriden. And if you go north, you got what, family? What is that? The Pacolet River, right? The Pacolet River. So if you go to the south of the Inn at Meriden, you come to Fair Forest Creek. And if you go to the north of the inn in Meriden, you got the Pacolet River. What did the ancestors say? The place was situated between Pacolet River and Fair Forest Creek. So we know we're in the right location. The ancestor has given us accurate geographical information. She's telling the truth. And she also says it was near where Governor Gist had a plantation. So check this out, family. Here's another Google map. I'm going to show you guys something. Now, Governor Gist Plantation is known in history as the Rose Hill Plantation. It's a state historic site. Now, look, real close to the Rose Hill Plantation, the Governor Gist Plantation, you have the Inn at Meriden. So she said that these two plantations were near one another, and the ancestor again is telling the truth. I want you guys to remember all of this when I go into the ghost stories to see she already has a pattern of being honest. She's telling you exactly what life was like. She's giving you accurate archaeological information. Now, what I want to do is prove to you that the Governor William Gist is a real person, and what you saw that's called Rose Hill Plantation is actually his plantation. Since it's not called the Gist Plantation, somebody might say, oh, well, how do I even know that a governor named Governor William Gist had a plantation there, and that plantation was called Rose Hill? Well, I'm going to come with the evidence like I always do. Check this out. Now, all of this research stems from what the ancestors said. This is why the slave narratives are so important. They give you vital information that if you're astute, you can run with it. Now, this guy is Governor William Gist, who the ancestor spoke of. Notice the dates. August 22nd, 1807 is when he was born, and he passed away September 30th, 1874. Now, Governor William Gist was born in Charleston. He was the son of Francis Fincher Gist and Mary Bolden. Following the death of his father in 1819, Gist came into possession of most of the family property, including substantial land holdings in Union District, where he established his home plantation, Rose Hill. Through additional grants and purchases, he added more than 6,700 acres to his original inheritance by 1870. So the Gist Plantation is known as Rose Hill. So when the ancestor says that the place that she was enslaved at was situated between Pacolet River and Fair Forest Creek and near where Governor Gist had a plantation, we see that all of this checks out when you look at the evidence and when you pull all of the evidence up. She hasn't told one lie yet. Now, the Rose Hill Plantation is what you're looking at on your screen right now. The Rose Hill Plantation is a state historic site. It is a state park located in Union, South Carolina. It is listed in the National Register of Historic Places and the Reconstruction Era National Historic Network. Rose Hill was once part of a large cotton plantation owned by secessionist Governor William Henry Gist, who by the start of the Civil War enslaved nearly 200 people. And this Governor William Gist, side note, he was known as a fire eater. Fire eaters were people who promoted secession. They wanted the Confederate States to secede from the Union, and all of this is what sparked the Civil War. This guy hated Abraham Lincoln, and he wanted to do everything that he could to keep his slaves, right? So the ancestor gave us accurate geographical information. Let's continue. Now we're finna talk about the many ghosts of the Keenan Plantation. Now that we know where we're at, Now that we know some of the players on the field, and now that we know we can trust what the ancestor is telling us, let's get into some of the ghost stories that she had to say, that she had to tell us about, and let's look at the evidence that she was telling the truth. Watch this, family. You never seen nothing like this before in your life. So she had heard of conjuring, but she did not know how it was done. Now, if you watch my video on hoodoo, the religion created on the slave plantation, you know what conjuring is. If you don't know what conjuring is, look through my videos, the archives, and find hoodoo, the religion that was created on the slave plantation, and you'll get up to speed. Now, but she did not know how it was done, the conjuring, and she never saw anybody who had been conjured. Yet, she had seen ghosts 2 or 3 times. One night, she saw a light waving up against a piece of furniture, then come towards her, then flicker about the room. But she wasn't able to see anybody holding the light. She had heard of headless men walking around, yet had never seen any. So this ancestor seen with her own eye a light flickering in the room, shining on pieces of furniture, and then coming towards her. In today's vernacular, we may call that an orb. Some people say that those are orbs. When you may be watching a video where somebody says that they seen an orb, or they seen a ghost, or they seen a spirit, and you'll just see like a ball of light just come into the frame and seemingly fly around the room, move around the room. These orbs, they can go through walls, they can go through people, they can go through furniture, they can go through lamps. They don't have any type of physical construct that hinders them from moving about freely. So the ancestor says that she sees one of these lights waving up against a piece of furniture. Then it came towards her. Then it flickered about the room. And so what she's trying to describe is what we know today as an orb flying around the room. But she says she saw nobody holding the light. So this light appeared to move in and of itself. Now, she also says that she heard of people said that they had seen headless men walking around. Remember, I showed you another slave narrative from another location where they talked about headless ghosts walking around. Now, these headless men could have been the disembodied spirits of one of the ancestors who was beheaded at death, who were killed horribly and lost their head, and now their spirits are stuck on this physical realm, on this physical plane. You understand what I'm saying? But that headless man thing seems to be a common occurrence. I heard that in several of these ghost stories. So we have a headless man, we have orbs floating around on the Keenan Plantation. This is key. We're on the Keenan Plantation in South Carolina, which is now known as the Inn at Meriden. Let's continue. She also tells us that another time on the plantation, Keenan Plantation, she heard footsteps approaching a certain house in the yard, but she could never see anybody walking, though she could distinctly hear the gravel crunching as the ghost walked along. Now, on these plantations, you got to understand the plantation had more than just one house on it. Yeah, you had the big house where the slave master lived, but you had other structures which could be called a house. Sometimes the overseer had a structure or a house that they lived in if they were like the main overseer that this plantation owner used. And they also had what they called the slave quarters, which were, for all intents and purposes, multiple houses that the enslaved individuals lived on. Now, this plantation is several acres. It's several acres in size, 4,000 acres in size. So, of course, there are going to be plenty of dwelling places. So she's saying one time she heard footsteps approaching one of the houses in the yard, but she couldn't see anybody walking. She just heard the ghost walking along the gravel. Now remember, sometimes you can see these apparitions and sometimes you can't. So we have multiple ghosts being spoken of on the Keenan plantation. So we have to ask ourselves something, family. Before we go, she tells more ghost stories. But before we go into another ghost story, Matthew and Pooh, the real bookworm, is there any evidence that what this lady is saying, excuse me, that what this ancestor is saying is true? Now, buckle your seatbelts, family. I'm about to mess you up. You hear me? Do you hear me? I'm about to F up your mind. Let's prove the ancestor correct. Let's prove the ancestor correct. Now, I just put this up, so I want you guys to remember the Bill Keenan plantation is now known. It was sold in 1990, and it is now known as the Ian Ed Meriden. So if we want to investigate this plantation, you don't look for the Bill Keenan plantation. That's an old name. What you look for is the Ian Ed Meriden. And I'm the type of researcher that I looked for the Ian Ed Meriden. And guess what I found in my research, family? I found out that the ghosts are still there till this very day. Now check this out. On the left, look at the top picture. I got that picture offline, right? I got that picture offline. I didn't write that stuff on it. We're saying the Inn at Meriden, Union, South Carolina. That's from 5/25/2019. And on the bottom, that's the same picture of the Keenan plantation. Just again, I want to get it through your head that the Keenan plantation is the Inn at Meriden. Now, look at how the Inn at Meriden is advertised online today. This is what they say. Check this out. The house was built in 1855 by the mayor of Union. In about 1900, the house was named the Meriden. The house was bought in 1990, and the owners started working on it in 1992. They started seeing a lady in a gray dress, and they began finding shiny pennies on the floor. Footsteps are heard upstairs. Stop. In 1992, the plantation had new owners. Now, mind you, the ancestor who was enslaved there was seeing ghosts back in slavery times. And when the new owners took over and started working on the place in 1992, they started seeing a lady, a ghost, in a gray dress. And they began finding shiny pennies on the floor. And what they said was they would be working in one room and they would hear the ghost. Sometimes they would see the ghost and then they would leave the room. And when they came back, there would be pennies or types of money on the ground, as if the ghost was leaving them some kind of gift to maybe say that the ghost was friendly. I don't know why the ghost was doing it. I'm just speculating. But the ghost would leave them shiny pennies in the room that they was just working on. And so the owners in 1992 also said that footsteps could be heard upstairs. Now remember what the ancestor already told us. The ancestor told us back in slavery times that another time she heard footsteps approaching a certain house in the yard, but she could never see anybody walking. So the ancestor back in slavery times at this location heard ghostly footprints. And in modern times, in 1992, the new owners heard what? Footsteps. We're talking about evidence to support the claim. How is it, family? Tell me this. How is it that you have at this one location our ancestor encountering ghosts back in the 1800s, And then in 1992, at the same location, individuals encountering ghosts. You can't tell me this place ain't haunted. I'm convinced the place is actually haunted because I'm trusting the word of the ancestors, but this is evidence, family. Evidence the ghosts are still there to this day. Check this out. They go on to say, in the modern advertisement of the inn at Meriden, a clairvoyant visited and identified 10 energy forces in the house. So the ghostly presence was so strong. Hear me out. The ghostly presence was so strong at this location that the ancestor already told us was haunted back in the 1800s. They got a clairvoyant or a psychic, someone who could communicate with the dead, someone who could peer into the spiritual realm. They say, hey, it's something going on at this house. We need to bring somebody in who can do a proper investigation and can give us some kind of, let us know, man. We're seeing some lady, we're hearing footsteps. This ghost is leaving us gifts. So they brought somebody in to spiritually examine the house to find an explanation to the supernatural occurrences. And the clairvoyant or the psychic or that medium identified 10 different energy forces in the house. Now, an individual could say, the clairvoyant could have made that up. The psychic could have made that up. They could have just been saying anything. They could have been telling the owners whatever they wanted to hear. But remember, you got this clairvoyant saying that there were 10 energy forces in and around that house. And when you look back to what the ancestors said, who was enslaved there in the 1800s, she seen ghosts on multiple occasions. She seen an orb floating around the room, coming towards her. She heard people talking about headless men, plural. And she heard the footsteps of a woman walking in the yard. So the ancestor has already described the footstep ghost, the orb ghost, and headless men. So in the records of the ancestors, the slave narratives, the oral history, we already have attestation to multiple ghosts being at this plantation. So it's not a stretch to believe that this clairvoyant identified 10 energy forces. Now check this out. Some of the ghosts include children, Native Americans, a mammy, a white dog. Remember, even animals can be ghosts. And a lady named Margaret. The cat, JD, used to carry on conversations with some entity, changing the intonation of its voice throughout their long conversations. It is thought that JD might still be around, JD is a cat, making sure the innkeeper is doing her job. Now, yes, that modern day cat may be one of the ghosts that the clairvoyant identified, but if the ancestor already identified multiple ghosts back in the 1800s, what we gotta understand is the ghost already been there, right? So we don't have to look for ghosts that came after the 1900s. We don't have to look for a ghost that came in 1980 because we have ghosts there, right? In the 1800s, prior to the Civil War. The Civil War was 1860. We have ghosts already there. Upstairs in the sister's room, there is an entity that stands in the bathroom door. Most people say they have never felt frightened and that the spirits in the house are all good. Now, mind you, the ancestor as well didn't tell us that she was attacked by a ghost. She just said the ghost that was there. And the ghost that stands upstairs in the bathroom quite possibly could have been that orb that the ancestor was describing. Now, I don't know those kind of specifics, but I'm just saying, isn't it wild that at this same location in the 1800s, somebody experienced ghosts, that in 1992, somebody would be experiencing ghosts as well. And not just ghosts, multiple ghosts. But it gets deeper, family. Check this out. The ghostly presence is so strong at the end in Meriden aka the Keenan Plantation, that they had begun to hold paranormal tours, right? And they were holding these paranormal tours as recently as 2019. When I tell you the ghosts are still there, that's exactly what I mean. Look at this flyer that they put out. Not me. I didn't make this one. This is a flyer that the owners of the inn at Meriden put out. The Haunted Inn at Meriden, Union, South Carolina, October 19th and 26th. Afterlife, paranormal tours and events. So they were actually taking people on paranormal ghost tours. Look at this flyer that they had made up. You see that picture on the right? That's the same location. And they also show you a few pictures of what it looks like on the inside. And we can see that there was $2.99 per couple. Let me see. They have a private room with bath because it's a hotel, so you get a room. You get a gourmet dinner, a ghost hunt, a tarot card reading, breakfast, a paranormal goodie bag, and a DVD copy of the event. Now these ghosts were so pronounced in modern times that they were able to make money off of it. They were able to charge people to come on these paranormal tours of this haunted location. Talk about strong evidence that when the ancestors said this place was haunted, they still saying it's haunted right now today. And what I'm gonna do for y'all real quick before we move on, I'm finna take you guys to a website, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna look at exactly what they were saying, right? I want to show y'all this. I want to show y'all this. This wasn't just this is not just the ancestor. I'm just sharing my screen. Give me a second. It's not just the ancestor. Boom. Let me pull this up. Okay. There we go. Y'all see on the kind of left hand portion of the screen, that's that flyer that I was just showing y'all in the PowerPoint. Now look, check this out. Overnight at the haunted Meriden Inn. They know it's haunted. Now this this particular tour was held May 25th, 2019 through May 26th, 2019. Because obviously you want to be there overnight, because a lot of times ghosts move around at night. Now look, they say you can have an intimate evening with Toby and Tony Hartfield of Afterlife Paranormal. Guest only. Private room with bath, gourmet dinner, real ghost hunt with paranormal equipment in your hands, tarot card reading, paranormal goodie bag, and breakfast in the morning in one of South Carolina's most haunted locations. They know the place is haunted. There are said to be 10, I'm right here. There are said to be 10 spirits, energy forces, or ghosts that share the inn at Meriden. These include men, women, children, Native Americans, and a white dog. The inn has more recent history of unusual happenings and occasional sightings, and the resident cat talks to someone, quote unquote, frequently. Meriden, an antebellum mansion, what they're talking about is before slavery ended, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, is surrounded by shady oaks and century-old magnolias, and is located in the gently rolling upstate region of South Carolina. Family, you see this? Now, taken without all of the extra context that I've already given you, an individual may come across something like this and say, oh, it's a scam. They're just trying to make money. They want you to just believe that it's haunted so they can charge you at the door. But no, that's not it at all. Because remember, the ancestor already told us that it was haunted before there was anything involved. There was no money to be made. But like I say, overnight at the haunted Meriden Inn, they understand that this place is haunted until this very day. The ancestor knew what they was talking about. Look, check this out. Another article on it. An overnight ghost hunt at this notoriously haunted South Carolina inn is the creepiest thing you'll ever do. Same place, same location. The Keenan Plantation. The Meriden Inn. They understand that place is haunted. Right? They understand that place is haunted. So what are we talking about? We're talking about ghost stories from the plantation and evidence to validate what the ancestors said. Well, I mean, in this instance, what more do you want? What more do you want? They going on ghost hunts at this place. How is it that they coming up with the same story that the ancestor came up with? How is that? How is that they're coming up with that place is haunted, and the ancestor came up with the same story that place was haunted in the 1800s? I'll tell you how they came up with that. The place is haunted. It ain't no secret to me. I mean, it ain't no big mystery. It ain't no big mystery. The place is haunted. Okay? The place is haunted. So what we're going to do, let's move on. Because that's not the only ghost story that the ancestor tell. Right? That's not the only ghost story that the ancestor tell about that location. Okay? Also, the ancestor tells us another ghost story about a ghost leading a woman to buried money. We're talking about ghost stories from the plantation, and we're giving evidence to prove the fact. The ancestor telling the truth, whether you can accept it and wrap your mind around it or not. Look what else she says happened. A neighbor told her a woman ghost came to her house one night, just sat on the front steps and said nothing. Repeated her visits several nights in succession, but said no word as she sat on the front step. One night, the neighbor's husband asked the ghost what did she want, why she sat on the steps and said nothing. The ghost then spoke and told him to follow her. He followed her and she led him to the basement of the house and told him to dig in the corner. Remember, the ghost lead him to the basement and tell him to dig in the corner. He did, and pretty soon he unearthed a jar of money. The woman ghost told him to take just a certain amount and to give the rest to a certain person. The ghost told the man if he didn't give the money to the person she named, she would come back and tear him apart. He very obediently took the small amount of money and gave the balance where the ghost directed, and he never saw the woman sitting on his steps anymore. Remember, whenever you encounter a ghost, either they died in some type of horrific way, or they have unfinished business. So it would appear that this particular ghost had money buried in the basement in a corner, stashed away, some savings, and passed away unexpectedly. And there must have been someone close to her that she felt like that money should go to. So this particular spirit appears to be trapped in this earthly realm because of the unfinished business. So she comes to the individual, tells him to go in the basement, go in the corner, dig. He digs, he finds a jar of money and gives it to the person that the ghost tells him to give it to. Now you may be wondering, okay, you did good when you showed us that the ghosts at the plantation are still there to this day, right? They still there to this day. But this particular ghost, how can the real bookworm offer evidence to validate this particular story right here? Well, I'm glad you asked. How many of you guys are familiar with the idea that right now, today, and for several years, they have been conducting archaeological digs on several slave plantations. I'm going to say it again. They have been conducting archaeological digs on several slave plantations. Now, sometimes when an individual thinks about archaeology, they're thinking, oh, somebody digging around in ancient Egypt for something that was 3,000 years old, or somebody digging around in Israel or Mount Sinai or Great Britain or in Africa. They're digging around somewhere looking for something 100,000 years old. They're looking for dinosaur bones. They're looking for evidence of civilization 5,000 years ago. Or, they're trying to find some type of evidence to help them understand Göbekli Tepe, or really, really, really ancient civilizations and sites. Well, while the institution of slavery may not be thousands of years old, it's old enough to be of interest to archaeology. And people are willing to put money into archaeological digs. Now, these digs are happening on several slave plantations, and they have come up with several pieces of interesting finds. Some of the information that they have that's related to the time period of enslavement in America, they have gathered this information from these archaeological digs. It's just sometimes an individual just may get the information that's disseminated, and they may not know how that information was learned, or they may not know how this thing was found out. So we want to ask ourselves, can archaeology help validate the ghost story of a ghost telling a man to dig in the basement, in the corner of the basement, and finding some money? I don't know. But check this out, family. In these archaeological digs of these slave plantations, they are locating something that they have dubbed subfloor pits. Subfloor pits. Now, if you don't know what a subfloor pit is, I'm going to explain it. Subfloor pits are typically shallow holes dug into the ground. You can probably already see where I'm going with this. They had many purposes: clay burrow pits, storage spaces, spaces of concealment, food storage, and spiritual spaces are a few of the most prominent types. Now, why they say spiritual spaces is because in some of these subfloor pits, they have found artifacts arranged in such a way that the experts say they may be related to the Bakongo spirituality. And by that, I mean spirituality coming from the Congo. They have a particular spiritual cosmographic cross that they use to talk about this realm, life, death, and the realm after that. It's a symbol that has too much meaning for me to really break it all down right now. But the artifacts that they have found in some of these subfloor pits have been situated in such a way that they look reminiscent of how these spiritual crosses, not dealing with Christianity, but these spiritual crosses were created in the Congo in Africa. Right? But not the subfloor pits don't come from Africa, just the arrangement of some of the artifacts that they found. Listen, the earliest appearance of subfloor pits dates to the late 17th century in Virginia and corresponds directly with the increasing enslaved African population of the colony. So when they're talking about the 17th century, that's from 1600 to 1700. So the late 17th century is, excuse me, I got the hiccups, is from 1650 to 1700, right? And they say that the appearance of these subfloor pits corresponds directly with the increasing enslaved African population of the colony. Now, this is something that the African Americans, this is something that we started over here. They didn't do it in Africa. There aren't subfloor pits in Africa. This is something that we started over here, is what the experts are saying. Though subfloor pits are not unique to sites of enslavement, they are an extremely common feature uncovered in slave quarters, and many archaeologists believe them to be an important cultural adaptation for the enslaved. So the majority of time when we're talking about subfloor pits in archaeology, those subfloor pits are going to be in reference to somebody that was enslaved or somebody that was freed from enslavement but used to be enslaved or learned to practice from someone that was enslaved. There is very little evidence for subfloor pits on African sites. It's hypothesized, remember, it's hypothesized now. This archaeological digs on slave plantations is still a relatively new field. It's hypothesized that newly arrived enslaved Africans in Virginia developed this practice in response to their new environment. The appearance of subfloor pits on other sites across the U.S. follow patterns of movement of enslaved individuals out of Virginia to other states. So you have the Africans being brought over here enslaved, right? Enslaved on plantations, put in these slave quarters, put in these different houses. And so they developed a practice in this new environment of creating what they're calling subfloor pits, digging pits out in the ground, burying things of value to either keep it safe from the slave owner taking it or from someone else taking it, someone else that's enslaved with them. Imagine if you're enslaved, right? You already have very limited access to resources. So everything is immensely more valuable. So you come across something that's valuable to you. It could be something as simple as a tool, right? Something as simple as a tool. It could be money. It could be food, extra food or something like that. You turn your back. Somebody else that's enslaved with you will take that from you. They'll steal it because they don't have much either. Everybody is in need. You understand that poverty, people in poverty will victimize each other, right? If everybody in the area is poor and then one person in that poor area has something that the others don't have, they'll break in your house, steal your TV, steal your Xbox, rob you when you're coming out your house. It happens, okay? It happens. Individuals in poverty, because of that self-preservation instinct, they will begin to victimize each other. And so in a situation like people being enslaved, you can almost imagine that not only would this pattern of behavior be visible, it'll probably be more prevalent when food is more scarce. And so what happened was the individuals came from Africa enslaved. They developed this practice of subfloor pits in Virginia. And as they were sold off to other plantations and moved around and shipped, the practice of creating subfloor pits went to multiple sites around the U.S. So you'll see them in Texas, Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana. This practice just spread. And since it was the enslaved who they are hypothesizing created it, it is more prevalent in the enslaved communities because that it became part of their cultural practices, basically. Listen, tons of research has been done exploring the use and function of these incredible features. But because they are essentially holes in the ground, their appearance in the archaeological record can be muddled. When they were in use, these holes were purposely kept clear of dirt so as to store objects or food or other items. When archaeologists uncover them, they're filled with dirt. If we're lucky, we're able to find clues amongst the soil to help us determine their original use. To add more complexity, often a single subfloor pit served multiple purposes throughout its use. Remember, people moved around a lot. People were shipped from plantation to plantation. So an individual could be in a particular slave quarters, create a subfloor pit, dig out a subfloor pit to keep their belongings. They could get shipped off to a whole nother state, never to return again, and someone else is housed in that particular slave quarters. And so then that particular subfloor pit can be reused by the new owner. That's what they're saying is adding more complexity to try to figure out the original uses of these subfloor pits because they were recycled. These clues come from a variety of sources of what the pits were used for. Oftentimes, they're archaeological. Traces of what pits contained survive in artifacts or soil inclusions we're able to uncover in the field. We can turn to the historical documentary records in places where people have written records detailing the construction or use of these features. An oral history passed down through generations can give us first-hand accounts of ancestors who relied on subfloor pits for all sorts of purposes. And I highlighted that because what we call the slave narratives, I interchangeably call oral history. So we can find out what some of these subfloor pits were used for looking at the oral history. Oral history, oral history like what? Oral history like what? Listen, what did the ancestors say? A neighbor told her a woman ghost came to her house one night, just sat on the front steps and said nothing. Repeated her visit several nights in succession, but said no word as she sat on the front step. One night, the neighbor's husband asked the ghost what did she want, why she sat on the steps and said nothing. The ghost then spoke and told him to follow her. He followed her and she led him to the basement of the house and told him to dig in the corner. What is the ghost leading him to based on what I just showed you? A subfloor pit. He did, and pretty soon he unearthed a jar of money. So possibly this woman lived in these particular slave quarters, was using this subfloor pit to hide money, possibly died unexpectedly, got shipped off to another plantation, died on that other plantation in another state, and her spirit returned because it had this unfinished business. She needed to get access to this money and possibly give this money to a daughter that she left behind or a family member that she left behind. Yeah, I'm trying to fill in the blanks, but it's obvious from the historical account that they're talking about a subfloor pit. Now, did the subfloor pits ever contain money? We seen artifacts, we seen jars, tools, food. Is there any archaeological evidence that our ancestors put money inside of these subfloor pits? Well, that's a very good question. Let's see if we can answer the question. Did our ancestors ever put money inside of these subfloor pits? Let's go here. Okay, so this is talking about a archaeological dig in Kentucky. Okay, let's go. We already know what a subfloor pit is, so we're going to go right to the findings. Now they're excavating a slave plantation in Kentucky, and they're going to give us some ideas of what the archaeology has found in some of these subfloor pits, evidence of it. They say during survey of the yard, archaeologists documented concentrations of architecturally, excuse me, now I got hiccups. Let me start over. During survey of the yard, archaeologists documented concentrations of architectural related artifacts, such as window glass, nails, and brick fragments. These revealed the locations of several buildings that had once stood behind the main house. Limited investigation of one of these structures exposed a portion of a stone foundation in an interior pit cellar. Researchers recovered large amounts of household artifacts from this location: ceramic dishes, eating utensils, scissors, buttons, toys, smoking pipes, and glass bottles and jars. Remember, the ancestor said it was a jar of money. Given the quantity and identity of these artifacts, archaeologists concluded that the foundation and pit cellar likely represented the remains of a slave house. Many of the ceramic dish fragments had hand-painted designs or decorative edging, which were popular during the 1820s to 1840s. These vessels were likely used by the Cook family and then passed down to the enslaved people who lived in the building. So we see that they're doing an archaeological dig on a slave plantation, and they have located, you see where they digging interior pit cellar? They're digging in subfloor pits. Now check this out, where it says what's cool. Slave house pit cellar. The pit cellar in the Forest Home slave house was next to a stone hearth foundation. Subfloor pits were common features of 19th century kitchens, cabins, and slave houses. They were typically used for storing food. Enslaved people or formerly enslaved people who became tenants after their emancipation used subfloor pits for other reasons too. They often stored personal objects there. Watch this. Several personal artifacts came from the Forest Home Slave Foundation pit cellar, like blue glass beads and a store token. The store token had been issued by the Brown, Curtis, and Vance dry goods store in Louisville. Patrons could have used it exclusively at the store as a form of payment. So this, for all intents and purposes, is money. But this type of money was only good at that particular store, which they didn't have cars. They couldn't just drive anywhere in the country that they wanted to drive to anyway. And so this particular store gave an individual tokens, which was like money that they could use to purchase goods at the store. They could use it as a form of payment. What is a form of payment? Money. Right? The token could indicate that a Cook family member had visited the store. On the other hand, the token, as well as the beads, may have held cultural or symbolic meaning for the enslaved residents. So here we have actual factual archaeological evidence of a slave plantation, a slave house on a slave plantation having a subfloor pit, and in that subfloor pit, them finding money. Look at that coin that's on your screen, family. Look at that coin that's on your screen. It got the same type of bird that's on like the quarter. You understand what I'm saying? Now remember, They say this is dating from 1845 to 1852. So it wasn't just money how we have money today, just wasn't flowing freely. This was money. You understand what I'm saying? This was money. So we've proven that there's been money found in these subfloor pits. There's jars found in these subfloor pits. These subfloor pits were used by the enslaved people, and we have archaeological evidence. And we have archaeological evidence supporting and bagging up that claim, right? So when the ancestor tells us this ghost story about a female ghost leading a man into a basement of a house, telling him to dig in the corner, and he find a jar of money, it don't sound so crazy anymore. Right? It don't sound so crazy anymore. She led him to a subfloor pit. And we have archaeological evidence that subfloor pits are real. And this is exactly what a subfloor pit would have been used for. And so the ancestor was telling the truth about where she was enslaved, the name of her slave owner, the location of the plantation, the name of the plantation that was in close proximity to hers, the name of the governor Gist who ran the plantation that was in close proximity to hers. We verified that she said the plantation was haunted by multiple ghosts, right? That's what the ancestor told us. And we found out that in modern times, they have recognized that particular plantation is haunted by multiple ghosts. So much so that it's known as one of the most haunted places in South Carolina. So much so that they actually had paranormal tours to go on ghost hunts at the place. Now, right now, today, I don't think you can go on a ghost hunt at that place today. I think as of now, it's been shut down, probably because of the condition of the building. But the ghosts are no doubt still there. You understand what I'm saying? The ghosts are no doubt still there. So what this means for us, right? What this means for us is we have provided plenty of evidence to validate the ancestors and the ancestors' plantation ghost stories. So I can't keep you guys forever. I wish I could, but I can't. All good things must come to an end. So as we wrap this up, I just want to let you guys know that even on the plantation, they seen ghosts all the time. I literally could have made this 10 hours long, telling you story after story after story after story. But I wanted to hone in on a couple of stories so that I could provide some evidence for it. And to show you guys that these slave narratives are so credible and they have so much detailed information that I can take a slave narrative of an individual who was slaved in the 1800s, and I can show you things that are going on right now to this day, right? So I want you guys to weigh the evidence. And you can just make up your mind in your own mind. Do you believe the ancestor was telling the truth about those ghost stories based on the evidence provided? Is it possible that the ancestor was telling the truth? And do you believe in ghosts yourself? So I want to thank you all for watching. This is Matthew Daniels TV. I am the illustrious author, writer, scribe, and bookworm. But I'm not just a bookworm, world. I am the real bookworm. Please make sure you get it right. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before. And I'm doing the book game like it'll probably never be done again, family. I got 16 books out. They said they in the public library. They selling at Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, half price books, Amazon. I got copies all the way in Africa, the UK, Canada, India, they know me for being the scribe, right? So I am the real bookworm. And as always, family, may your name live on forever and may your memory never die. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And as always, let's make intelligence great again. Hotep, I'm out. Read a book, man.